curious to know how many of you are graduate students? Awesome. And what are some of the fields that you're studying? Just curious. Economics. Philosophy. Awesome. Somebody must have studied. What else? Nuclear. Oh, Bridget. Biology. What are you hoping to do? Yeah. Okay. All right, what else?
Law.
You're studying law. Are you in the school of law? Well, I don't know what, you know. I almost sat for the LSAT once, you know. I was having a day at like my job. My sister and I were, you know, online trying to figure out if we should take the LSAT. And we realized how hard it was going to be. So what else are you studying?
Accounting.
Accounting?
Geoscience.
Geoscience. Awesome. And what does a geoscience degree get you? Where do you go from there?
If you want money, you go into petroleum.
And then you don't. You'll teach in college or high school. What are you hoping to do? You want money?
I hope to get a postdoc position.
Was it cool? Oh, awesome. Anybody else? Anybody studying medicine? I want to apologize right now for all of you studying medicine with how difficult the whole healthcare thing is going. Okay, for those of you that are young professionals, who's young professionals? What do you people do? What do you do?
Software development.
Okay.
Software implementation.
Epic. Epic user.
IT work.
What's that?
IT work.
IT. Awesome. What else? Yeah, I know you.
Ministry.
Ministry.
I work in shed.
You know more money, right?
Yeah.
What else? She was.
Just don't say software development. Don't look it up.
Nilsson, not Nilsson. Nilsson, Nilsson, by marriage, not by birth. Yeah, sorry, Father. Are you Norwegian or Swedish?
Danish is the EN. So Nilsson with an EN is the Danish spelling.
SSON is Norwegian.
Norwegian or Swedish?
Yeah, that's what I hear. And my background, I was I think I'm older than all of you, with the exception of Father. And I graduated from, I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I went to Ohio University, not Ohio State. You don't have to hate me. To OU, if you know what OU, does anybody know what OU is?
It's B-O-S, excuse me.
What's that? So Ohio University, which is in southern Ohio on the border of West Virginia and Ohio, and I studied education and psychology. Clearly not what I do now, but that's okay. And did my undergrad there. Then in my senior year of college, felt a tremendous pull from the Lord. Only I didn't know it was the Lord. I had applied for the Peace Corps. And they do good work in the Peace Corps, but it was not, I was searching for what my heart was longing for, because my heart was really longing for something profound. And I looked for the answer in secular ways, so I searched in the Peace Corps, because I thought, they serve, right? And they do a lot of really good and important work, but it wasn't what my heart was searching for. It wasn't the call that God had placed on my heart. So I was very disappointed, and I felt very lost in that process, and I walked away and started searching in the Christian mission field. So I ended up, ironically enough, at Net Ministries. Did anybody serve on Net? Anybody, you know what Net is? Yeah? Net's in West St. Paul, Minnesota, and they send out teams of 10 to 12 young adults every year, and you live in community, and you work with youth and families throughout that year, and so they train you. It was after 4 years at Ohio University. It was a So I had an opportunity to dry out, hang out, and read the Bible and the catechism. And I fell in love with working in the church that year. Just loved it. But I knew that if I was going to work in the church, as things go, you cannot do it without being educated. And so I went and I was a Catholic school teacher in the meantime for a couple of years. I worked in inner city schools and taught grade school, which was fun, but definitely not my thing. And loved them and fell in love more and more with working for the church. So I worked in a Catholic school. And after my time there, I went to graduate school. But the only way I could go to graduate school is I was a full-time campus minister for 4 years. And so I spent time on campus and I worked with graduate students and non-traditional students. So that was my role, was to coordinate all orientation, social events, spiritual events, all that good stuff. And then in the meantime, I got a master's degree in counseling and a master's degree in theology and catechetics. And so I was about 3/4 of the way through my degree in counseling when I realized I did it again. I got another degree that I don't want to use. And so I started taking theology as a hobby and ended up with a degree in it. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for both the degrees. They've been of great service to me in my work in the church. So from there, I went and I worked, my first job was a director of a Catholic preschool, which is kind of funny, because I went from graduate non-traditional students to 3 and 4-year-olds. And then from there I worked in parishes for 10 years. And so I was a director of religious education, adult faith formation. And in the meantime, I also worked as a junior high. I taught junior high religion. So I would leave during the day and I'd go teach religion to the junior high kids and had fun during the day. So I met my husband in about 4 years ago. We met on a Catholic dating site. And yeah, how about that? Oh yeah. And I was getting freakishly afraid that I would never get married. And I was living with a family in my parish, and my mom, my host mom that I lived with, looked at me and said, "Girl, you are never going to get a husband with the life you are living." And she's, basically encouraged me to go online. And so I met Matt, and he moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I was living, and we dated for a year. And we got married, and we now have a baby. So, we'll tell you more about that crazy story in a little bit. But I'm here to continue, or to basically introduce you. I know you're very familiar with theology of the body now. Is that correct? Andy came and talked about theology of the body. Everybody knows. Is there anybody that doesn't know what theology of the body is? So you all do. You get more familiar the more beer you drink too, right? So, but when I was talking with Shalane, it was a very natural conclusion that from what Andy talked about to now would be to focus on the topic of truth, freedom, and the language of the body. And sort of this cultural battle that we face. And the battle you're going to face when you walk out this door, it is so awesome to see that you all have each other. Because just soak this up. Because this time you have together is the time where your roots grow deep. Where you just really grow in your faith, you learn more about what the Lord wants for you, you have people to pray with, you have people around you who support that. Because when you go out into the world, it is different. And then you don't always have 40 or 50 people around you to drink beer and talk about the Lord and joke about things that you all know what I was talking about, right? And so this opportunity that you have right now, just soak it up and love it. And spend every minute you can, There's an old movie, The Dead Poets Society. You remember that movie?
It's not old.
It's not old. Well,
That's not too old.
the other day, I got an email that said, 50 things you know if you're a child of the 70s and 80s, right? And I said to Lindsay Becker, you guys know Lindsay, right? Hey, Lindsay, come check this out. It's awesome. And she's like, I was born in 1985. I was like, oh, okay. So she doesn't really know in the late 70s and 80s, but I do. There was, in the movie Dead Poets Society, so they want to suck the marrow out of life. And I feel like that's when you have this kind of community, you just have to kind of suck it dry, and love it and soak in it, because this is one of the few places in the world that you can put this screen up and not have people throw things at you. Okay. Truth, freedom, and the language of the body. And so, yeah, I'm pumped to share this topic with you. My husband and I, funny enough, have only been married for like 3 years, right? And we were invited to do, we were invited to do marriage prep days, which is kind of funny because like, we've only been married for 3 years. Like, what the heck do we know about marriage? And, but this is the part of the day that we do. So it was kind of cool because it's something that he and I have talked a lot about, and we spend a lot of time praying and thinking about, so that when we meet young couples who are getting married, we can inspire them to live a life that really truly does reflect God's plan for their marriage. But Cardinal Dolan, most recently, when he was meeting with the Synod on the New Evangelization, one of the things that Cardinal Dolan said at that Synod that Pope Benedict called just before he resigned, Cardinal Dolan said, "We believe with the philosophers and poets of old who never had the benefit of revelation, that even a person who brags about being secular and is dismissive of religion has within an undeniable spark of interest into the beyond, and recognizes that humanity and creation is a dismal riddle without the concept of some kind of creator. And truth, freedom, and the language of the body are all the ways that we live out and express how we represent that presence of God on earth." You know, when you look at the theology of the body and all those things that it really means, I think there was this mistake for a long time that the study of the theology of the body was about sex, that it was limited to this discussion on sex. And that's really not what it's about at all. It's about who we are and what this is about and why we're here and the purpose of this human this human interaction that we have with one another and the plan that God has for it. And we're supposed to reflect in the image of the Trinity the great love that God has, the eternal life-giving relationship of love. And sometimes that's in a sexual way, sometimes that's in a marital way, sometimes it's in a consecrated way, sometimes it's in a celibate, priestly way, sometimes it's in a single way that as you're journeying to the next part of your vocation and call. We're all called to that. But really, what does that look like? And what does that mean every day? You know? And so I love this quote because even though he wasn't talking about theology of the body or truth, freedom, and the language of the body, he was talking about that we all want to know our purpose, right? We all want to know why we're here. We want to know what we're searching for. What's the next thing? So, okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Oops.
Yeah. So the questions on everyone's mind, and I want you to yell out the ones that I did not list here. The questions on everyone's mind. These are, I was just brainstorming, like, what do I think about? You know, at 38 years old, what do I wonder? You know, who am I? And at every stage of your life, you sort of have to reassess, who am I and what am I doing here in this place? Sometimes it's a new job, you have to reassess it. Sometimes it's a new part of your career, a new part of your education, or you always sort of have to reassess, who am I and where am I going from here? Sort of, what's the purpose of this? Is this that because I made a mistake and I landed here? Did God intentionally put me here? You know, all those questions, they go through your mind in every turn of the journey of life. And then, you know, some people really question and struggle, does God exist? And if he does, is he concerned with the details of my life? And if he is, then why aren't they happening now? You know, we kind of wonder that sometimes, especially in graduate school or after graduate school, you get into what seems like a holding pattern, and you wonder, okay, you know, because when you're in school, there's always you're working toward the next thing, the next test, the next semester, the next goal. When you start your job, it might be to get a job, or it might be the next phase of your job, but sometimes it kind of puddles out. And you wonder, okay, what's next? What's the next plan? Because your whole life, you've been building, and then it stops. But it isn't stopping, and the Lord has a plan. But to take those times to wonder, you know, does he care about the details of where I'm headed? And what am I supposed to do with my life? I think we have to ask this question all the time, right? You know, we always have to sort of, what does he want me to do now? But does he have the long-term plan? Sometimes we don't even need to know the long-term plan. We just need to know right now, what is his plan for me? Do I matter in the big scheme of things? You know? Who will I marry? We all know that's on the minds of many, right? We don't want to admit it, but it's true. It's what we're made for. We're made for communion. And so everybody wants to act like, oh, I'm really cool being single, or I'm really cool not knowing, but it's not true. We're not. You know? And whether we're called to be married, whether we're called to be of a religious order, or whether we're called to be a consecrated life, or whether we're called to be priests, we all do. And I think it's okay to admit it. I'll say it, you don't have to. Or should I get married? What are some other questions that people might have? Did I miss any? This is my brainstorm list, so there might be some I didn't even think of. Do you have one? No? Then hit them all. Will I get married? What else? Any others?
What am I gonna do tomorrow?
What am I going to do tomorrow? Okay. Tim, you have lots of free time. Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, or is there another step? You know, those sorts of things. Any other questions? Did I hit most of them?
Am I doing the right thing?
Am I doing the right thing? That's a great one. You know, if the Lord, how do we discern? Am I made for this, or am I made for something else? That's a great one. Discernment is a huge struggle, right? Okay, go ahead. Okay, so my question to you, and I want you to take just 1 minute with the person next to you, and I want you to come up with as many terms as you can that the world and the church might say the same word, but we mean completely different things. So I want you to come up with a list of terms where in the church we use the word and in the world we use the word, but they mean different things. So I'll give you 1 minute with the person next to you. Will someone write for me? Joe, can you write? What is up with that person? Okay, come on, Joe, come on. We won't disturb the quote from Luke chapter 6, but we will write and list. Okay? What are they? Love, very good. We'll just make a small list underneath. What else? Marriage.
Death.
Death? Did you say death? Yeah, that's a good one, yeah. Death. Truth, very good.
Religion.
Beauty. Oh, beauty.
Freedom.
Freedom. You guys see?
Yeah, everyone clap.
The movie, the Brave Hearts.
Good job.
Quality.
Success.
Religion.
What else?
Quality.
Family? Catholic? Did somebody say Catholic? Oh, Luke. What else?
Substance. Quality.
Quality?
Equality.
Equality.
Religion.
Religion?
Virtue.
Family.
Virtue? We said family, that's a good one. Self-worth?
That's my idea. That doesn't.
We'll take the concept of self-worth. Okay, what else?
Rights. Politics.
Chastity. Chastity, beautiful.
Prudence.
Prudence. Fabulous one. Isn't that a girl's name?
Yes, it is.
Exactly. It was a very popular name when I was a kid on YouTube. Girls that were named Prudence. Yeah.
Substance.
Substance. Are you a philosophy major? Who's the philosophy major? Justice. Justice. Yeah.
God.
God.
Big G guy.
Charity.
Charity. Ooh, who said that one? Oh gosh, what's your name?
I'm Bridget.
Bridget, can I hire you? What are you studying?
I work at Epic.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. So clearly, we can see that there are things. It's like the movie. Remember, I think it was from the 70s. The movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Has anybody ever seen Invasion of the Body
Nice.
Snatchers? Yes. Yes, Father.
Nice.
And everything looks the same, but you know they're not quite the same, right? Or maybe from the 80s there was the movie Pet Sematary, remember?
Yeah.
Somebody would have this, okay, so more of you get that reference. Okay, so pet cemetery, they get their cat or dog back and they think this is my cat or dog, and then all of a sudden it turns into something it really wasn't. So we use the same words, and it appears to be the same thing, but we mean two totally different things with each one of these, or possibly three, or even four. Or in the world and society we live in right now, heck, whatever you want it to be, right? And so I think it's very, very important in all things we do to always know what our common language is. And because it's hard to read things in the church, or it's hard to hear things from the Holy Father, because we think with the definitions. I know that I do. I'll think, why is the Holy Father saying that? Or why are the bishops writing that? And in the language that I think I know what it means, when then I go to study, I realize the church means something totally other, right? I saw a funny interview with the bishop, and somebody said, "Where's the Pope coming from?" You know, and what's his angle? And I've heard the bishop say this twice. He's like, "Well, I'm pretty sure he's Catholic." You know, I mean, like, we have to know what the Catholic angle is, right? And we always have to assume the Catholic perspective. So when it comes to the Holy Father, so I put a few up there, which all of yours are actually fantastic examples, but the ones we're dealing with today, particularly, I listed. And so we see the word freedom obviously has a totally different meaning, you know, and a lot of times, every time we talk about freedom, and Mary's house, my husband yells out, freedom, you know. Truth, marriage is probably the hottest topic right now in terms of all these terms. What does it really mean, right? Love, what is love? Charity is the word that we listed on the board. Because if we redefine the word love, then everything else in a ripple effect changes as a result, right? Conscience, I have to go according to my conscience. You'll hear this phrase all the time. According to my own conscience, I had to do what's right according to my conscience. Well, what is your conscience? What is my conscience? And to know that there is an objectivity to how a conscience should and is formed according to the church and according to God's plan. A person, that's one that we would say regarding this topic. There would be a different definition of what constitutes a human being, a person. And for all of you philosophy lovers, you know, what is a human person and what constitutes a person. Right and wrong, and also good and evil. Good and evil, I think, is an interesting one because even those of us that work in the church a lot tend to have a misunderstanding, and we use these terms wrong. When the church speaks of a good, what does the church mean?
Something that's, well, first of all, good for you.
In what sense?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, so what does the
you
word
benefit
good
from-
mean?
Yeah, well, if it's good for you, it means that it benefits you to some degree, right?
Okay, benefits you in what way?
Points you towards God.
What'd you say?
Points you towards God.
Yeah, leads you to eternal beatitude, if it's a good, right? And brings heaven to you here on earth.
Well, I mean, it seems like that could be the case, but it seems like there are certain goods that actually kind of obscure that, right? So, I mean, it seems like...
But is it good?
Well, no, it seems like you can want a good thing in a wrong way, right? So, well, family's a good thing, right? But at the same time, it seems like your love of your family can obscure you from, you know, seeing God and things, right?
That's a misimplication. Yeah, we could talk all day in circles like this, yeah. No, I know what you're saying, that you could want a good, but you can't, the ends does not justify the means. You can't do a wrong for a good, right?
Well, I mean, sure, but we can talk about this later.
A good is something that brings you to closer to God. It points you to God. Now, it could be something you can enjoy a really good meal. Food is good, right? St. Augustine would often say that food is God's love made present, right? So that food is a good. Family is a good. You know, all those things are good. There's nothing, but they don't always need to be, you know, kneeling on pencils, you know, in a church, you know, with rain dripping from the leaking roof. Like, it doesn't need to always be, you know, it can be a good that we enjoy, right? And evil, though, when the church speaks about good and evil, it talks about things that are not good. So it's not necessarily a demon hiding behind a bush that's going to jump out at you, but necessarily it's not good. So it's not leading you to God, it's not leading you to heaven, it's not leading you to eternal glory and communion with God. And so, and to his purpose for your life. So just to define, those are the terms, some of the language that we're going to use. But all the things that you listed are related. You know, understanding what beauty is, understanding what prudence is or chastity, and all those things tie in to all these main ideas as we go through them. So I just asked you, let's talk about what does the culture, or what, if I was going to ask, who is like 9th graders in high school, right? They're sort of in the bowels of the earth. And if you were to ask a 9th grader, what is freedom? What would they say?
I do what I want.
No curve.
Driving.
Driving, right. Right. What are you going to say, John?
To do what you want, it's do what you want, when you want.
When you want,
Yeah.
right? That's a 9th grade answer, right? This, I can do whatever I want, when I want, no control. If you
No
ask
one can
a
control me.
senior in high school, what do they say freedom is?
College.
College!
No there.
Yeah, that's true, huh? What else? No curfew.
Yeah.
Yeah, not living in my parents' house specifically.
Got
No
that.
one to tell me that I have to get up and go to church or school or any of that. Doing what I want to do. Similar, but a more sophisticated doing what I want to do, ever so slightly. Right? In college, in a secular mindset, not in our mindset here at the backdrop of faith, but in a secular mindset, just a sophomore in college, what is their idea of freedom?
Frat party.
Party. What else? Is it any different?
It feels good.
Whatever feels good. Yeah.
Not being held accountable.
Not being held accountable. Right? That's a really good one. As
Yeah.
long as I'm not hurting anybody else, it's my life and my decision, right? My niece is a sophomore in college, and I just told her the other day she's in a lot of trouble for the freedom that she has chosen to embrace. And I said to her, the older you get and the more freedom you have, the more bosses you have, and the more people you have to answer to. So just face that fact and you'll be okay, you know? She's like, everybody's telling me what to do. You know, and she wants to be an adult. There's a longing to be an adult. There's a longing to be. But yet, undergraduate is really a difficult time because there's this false notion of freedom in the secular sense, but you're really not in a lot of ways. For good reasons and negative. You know, you still live in your parents' house. They're still helping to foot the bill. You're still young and could be harmed in a lot of ways. And so it's a goofy time for them. And I feel bad for them because it is really hard. You know, it's a hard time because you want to be free, you want to be an adult, but you don't really have the opportunity. You don't have the money or the resources or the degree or the opportunities yet. And so it's really difficult for them. What does the church say is freedom? What does God say is true freedom?
Choosing the good.
Choosing the good. Okay. What else? Let's start with God first. So hold on to that thought, okay? What does Jesus say is freedom?
The truth will set you free.
What does he say?
The truth will set you free.
Yeah, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free, right? The truth is freedom, right? What does the church then, as a result, the church says things that are toward, yeah, things that reflect truth, beauty, goodness in the eyes of God. Do you see in the life that you live a battle over freedom? You're shaking your head in the back. Where do you see that battle? State Street. That's State Street. Where do you see it?
Every time the alarm goes off in the morning, wanting to stay in bed or wanting to.
Very good example.
Nice.
Yeah. Knowing that the right thing is to get up and go to class. It's not like, oh, I'm a saint because I got up and went to class, right? It's not always like every action you're choosing is a wholly, directly, you know, but it's a good thing. It's ordered, it's in right order, it's responsible, it's accountable. What else?
Well, not specifically, like sin enslaves you.
Right? Any other examples you can think of where this, just that you see it, you're in the midst of this sort of battle over the word freedom, over the concept of freedom in your life, of the people around you? You don't see it anywhere? I mean, it's obviously all over this college campus, right?
Yeah.
Right? We see it in the partying and the,
Birth control.
in the birth control.
Yeah.
You want to light up a room, go to the college campus and say, everybody should get off birth control, right? We see it all the time. My niece, the story of my niece is she's a sophomore in college, and she was a talented and gifted student her whole life. And she's just always had this sense of, like, I just want to do my own thing. And in my family, she uses the word, I want to be free. She says this statement all the time. And she started dating this guy who appeared, for all intents and purposes, to be a fairly decent individual. And she's so tied into him, he just got into a bunch of legal trouble. He was arrested and is being charged with a felony. And my niece is now being charged as well because he was staying in her house. She did nothing. But because she associated herself with people who lived this sense of freedom, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, even though she didn't even do it. And she didn't, and there's proof she wasn't even there. Yet, by allowing him to stay in her house and not separating herself from him and not turning him in, she's being charged. And she gets on the phone and she'll say, she's a sophomore in college, she's brilliantly smart. She's in a nursing program, she's halfway through. And she'll say, I just want everybody to leave me alone. I'm an adult. I'm taking care of myself. She is sucked into this idea of freedom. She's bought the cultural lie. And we try to tell her all the time, this is not what God created you for. This is not what God's plan is for you. That sense of freedom, of living in your own apartment and doing your own thing and letting him do whatever he wanted to do in your space, created this devastatingly difficult situation for her. And my whole family is suffering over her. So, you say here, it was a great statement. As long as I'm not hurting anybody else, it's hurt my whole family. It's hurt my sister. It's hurt her brother. We see these ideas. That's an extreme example, but it's real. That when we are allowed to do everything we want to do, it isn't always for our good. We think it's what we want. That's right. Okay, go ahead. What about truth? What does the culture say? What'd you say?
There's something confused about that. I don't even think they know what they think.
You know what? That is a good explain yourself earlier.
Just because this is just from teaching 101 or TA 101 over and over again, having to explain to them what we mean by truth. It's not this kind of weird nebulous thing that's supposed to be so mysterious.
In what class do you teach this?
101, philosophy 101.
Okay.
Yeah, so part of what we do and try and, philosophy is kind of a bad rap for this, but literally one of the first things that we try and do is basically just kind of get a lot of our students to be comfortable with the idea that there is this thing as truth. There's a certain way the world is, and statements that are true if they line up with that.
Natural law, if you will, right?
Well, natural law is slightly different.
I know, but
so there's just a way the world is. A statement like the cat is on the mat is true if there's a cat and it's on a mat. That's a true statement. That's what truth is.
It attests to a reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so, and especially in philosophy, I imagine it's a very difficult field to attest to truth, right? Because people think when they take philosophy, it means that you can question everything, and there's sort of no way to nail it down.
Well, there's the question between knowledge and truth, and we say that there's truth. It's just that knowledge is maybe a little harder to come by than you might think. So, that's the distinction we try and hammer into their heads too. There's a truth that we're all trying to get at. The question is how we get to it.
Sure.
That's it.
So if I can, what's your name? Derek. A nebulous idea of truth, right? That would be one thing that the world would say, that there's sort of this free-floating
There are a lot of gray areas.
Gray, very good. Not black and white, it's gray. What else?
Relative.
It's relative to who you are. and
Yeah,
your
subjective.
experience. What's
Subjective.
subjective? Go ahead.
Can we prove it?
Can we?
What can be proven by facts?
What can be proven? Yeah, isn't it interesting? We live in a time where absolute truth is sort of poo-pooed in academic circles, yet there's this whole move to want to prove everything with science at the same time, right? It's sort of an odd contradiction that's happening in the world that we live in. And so they want to say, well, you can't prove that God exists because science doesn't point to it, they'll say. Yet at the same time, there's sort of an underlying attitude in society that there's no such thing as absolute truth. So it's I think it's a contradiction. Keep going. I want to go back one. Okay, so have you ever seen the movie The Truman Show?
Yeah.
Is anybody married here? You're married. Okay, good. Okay. So in marriage prep, we use this example a lot. And you know the story of Truman, right? Okay. And in the movie, the producer of the show, the creator, he's referred in the movie as the creator, makes a statement. He's being interviewed by a news agency, and the news agency says, how can you justify that you put this man, you know, the story of Truman is that he basically lives in a studio, right? And they've created this false world that he can't leave the island he lives on. So he grows up believing this is his reality, and this is the world in which he lives in. He thinks it's real. But every person, every situation, is staged. And even the sky and the water around him is false. It's staged. And so a news agency questions the creator and says, how can you justify doing this to a human being by making him believe this is the world? And do you know, what does the creator say? Does anybody know what the creator says? Okay, it's an old, yeah, it's like maybe 10 or 15 years old, right? Maybe older than that, I don't know. 20? The creator says, what difference is it than the rest of the world? We're all just products of the environment in which we've been handed.
That's true.
It is, but it's wrong. We have the ability to think beyond that which is spoon-fed to us. God created us with the ability to reason, with the ability to question, with the ability to wonder, what is this all about? That's a God-given ability, right? And so in the movie, he's not free to be who he is because his entire life is contrived and everything he lives is a lie. And there's also, you know, there's the old, another example would be the idea of the allegory of the cave, right, from Plato, right? We all know, you've all read it, right, like 8th grade English or whatever. And the person is chained in a cave, you know, in a cave under the ground, and the only reality they know is the shadows that are on the wall. And then they go on to question, what would happen if you unchained his head and he could look around and he could see the experiences around him and realize that there's more, there's something projecting the shadow on the wall. You know, and then they say, what if we were to let that person go out into the sunlight? What would happen to him or her? And so all these questions get raised from this story, like, is it right to let someone believe that only the shadows on the wall are what is reality? Or is it more right, is it more just, is it more good to allow them to see the truth of what casts the shadows? And even more so, wouldn't it be more just and more good and more right to let them go outside and experience the full glory of sunshine? Right? It might be painful, it might be difficult, it might be hard, but it's real and it's true. And that's what freedom is, right? And so you see, and I listed you just a few examples, you know, things like just off the top of my head that I think have been extremely detrimental to the society we live in. So go for it. Do you know the show?
I wish I did.
Has anybody ever seen it? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I believe that the show did a tremendous amount of damage in its 5 years or however long it was. I don't know how long. Sorry.
Is it disgrace?
This show, when they put it on TBS or TNT or whatever channel it plays on right now, the original show is 55 minutes long. When they cut out all the things that cannot be shown on cable television, it's less than a half an hour.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. I remember watching it. I was working at a parish, and they were showing things that I was watching with some of the girls that I met, some of the young adult women that I was friends with in my parish, and they loved this show. And they were like, come on, you have to come over. These are my church friends. And they're like, you gotta come over, we have wine, we watch Sex and the City, it's awesome. And so I go over, and I think my mouth felt, and I have a blood and guts story that I don't tell, but I was not a good girl. I mean, I saw a lot of bad stuff, and I got in a lot of trouble, to the point that my parents cut me off in college, stopped paying my bills, and said, you're done, and until you change your life, we're not paying anymore. And so I did see a lot of bad stuff, and I hung out with people that I can't even believe and fathom that I did. But this show shot the hell out of me. I couldn't believe the things they put on TV. And I think what it did was it opened the door for women to think, and for women to, in a sense, feel like they're empowered to use people sexually. It was sort of, before this, it was the mentality that men did that. Women didn't. And now it opens the door for women to use men just as much as men can use women.
I think it also encourages women that that's the norm. It makes it seem like this is what life is meant to be, and it paints a picture, and it's so artificial.
And you know what's funny about this show? At the end of the show, how it all ends? They all get married. Are you kidding me? They all decide really their true happiness has been being married and having families. And that's what happens to all of them.
If you're a woman and you're not having sex, you're less of a woman, according to feminists, because you're not having sex. And that's just
Right. Okay, keep
Yeah,
going.
Sex in the City, but feminism.
Do you know this show?
okay.
It's pretty funny, huh?
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, yeah.
So what we're talking about here is things that express what it really means to be free, what it really means to be truly who I am, to respond to who I really think I'm made to be, right? These women can be who they want, they can be sexual, they can use men, they can do all kinds of bizarre sexual things and exploit themselves. And, you know, they're doing drugs in one scene and they're having sex with some guy that's 20 years younger and they're whatever from here to here, and that's not even like the bad stuff, that's the mild stuff. And Will and Grace, and it's a funny show. And it's tempting to want to watch it and go, yeah, but they're hilarious, you know? The problem is, when I got married, I started to find this stuff very offensive. Because it degrades what I have, and what I work so hard to protect. And I know it's different. When I wasn't married, I felt a little differently about it, but I felt very strongly once I got married, because I was like, wow, I worked really hard to find a good Catholic man. And he works really hard to be a good Catholic man, and I work hard to be a good Catholic woman. And like, they make a joke out of it. And so it starts to become a little offensive as I'm growing in my life and in my maturity of marriage, right? But this show, and they attribute themselves, and the producers attribute themselves of making homosexual relationships mainstream. And they also make it mainstream on television. Prior to this, a homosexual relationship or a homosexual encounter was very taboo on TV. 7 years of Will and Grace, and you get Glee, right? You ever seen the show Glee? You've never seen Glee? Hit the click of the button.
Oh,
Yes! So now, not only do we have rampant sexual encounters where people are seeking to know who they are and what they're made for, we have homosexual exploits and bisexual exploits where people are seeking, those people are seeking. They're struggling. They're longing to know who they are and what they're made for. That's the truth. They're not doing it because they think it's fun. They're doing it because they really are searching. And then you get, now let's introduce it to our teenagers. Let's turn it into a 13-year-old musical experience with homosexuals, sexual exploits, and now what's the main thing that they are focused on Glee, do you know?
Regionals.
Gender identity. They are now introducing, it's okay, you don't know what you are. It's okay to not know what you are, right? And so now we have high school students. Do you know in Madison, every high school in Madison has a transgender support group for their kids. So this has become very normal. So the culture we live in is teaching us, in a sense, a false notion of what it means to search for who you are, to seek what true freedom is, to seek what truth is about how I'm created. Because if you notice, every one of these shows that has sort of a major influence on our culture, and you can go and you can look at all of them, they're all about sex. You know, they don't go and say, wow, 60 Minutes, it's really influencing everybody, you know? I mean, it doesn't. It just doesn't. The shows that are influencing the culture are shows that are all about people searching for their identity through sexual experimentation and sexual exploration. Which is shocking when you really realize that. These shows that shape the culture. What about The Big Bang Theory? Have you ever seen The Big Bang Theory? Yeah. I love that show, right? It's really funny. If you watch the first couple seasons of The Big Bang Theory, everybody's a virgin, no sex. You watch it now, everybody's having sex. It like took this huge turn, right? Because that's what seems to influence whether or not people look at it. So, all right, let's keep going. Okay, so one thing the theology of the body isn't Catholic sex education. And what we talk about just isn't sex. It's about my identity. It's about how God created me. It's what I'm intended for, which might involve a marital sexual relationship, but it might not. And so we want to look at it in a bigger picture, that when we're searching for our identity, when we're trying to learn who we are, what truth is, what freedom is, what the language of this body is, it isn't always about sex. I have a friend who once said, many years ago, he's been saying it for years, and now he's saying, you know, I don't want everything that's about me to be identified by my sexual identity, by who I sleep with, or this or that. Like, I am a person first. I'm created in the image and likeness of God, and it shouldn't be just about who I have sex with, right? And I think that's one of the misunderstandings about theology of the body, that it's just about sex, that it's about understanding what your sexuality is made for, and it's not. It's Christian anthropology. What did God create us to be from the beginning of time? Okay, so, so the meaning of our physical body and also God's plan for us here. Like, what's the purpose of this? And what's the purpose of my body in a single relationship, when I'm in college, when I'm preparing as a young professional, as a married person, as a priest, as a religious? What is the purpose of this body? Because it has a purpose. Just because Father Nilsson became a priest doesn't mean that everything that God created within his being no longer has a purpose. It does. Same thing with a religious sister. Her sexuality is not void because she became a sister. It just has a different purpose. Each person is a gift to be given. And they have a value, and they have a meaning. And who they give that gift to is what the theology of the body talks about. I'm married, I give my gift to my spouse gives it to me. If you're a priest, you give that gift to the church and sacrifice, right? And it's much deeper than that. That's even kind of dumbed down. And as a religious, she gives it to the Lord, that she's the visible sign of the bride of Christ here on earth. I had in my last parish, high school girls had never seen a nun before, had never seen a sister. We were in Raleigh, North Carolina, it's a Bible Bell. And they were just we went to the March for Life. They just wanted to see a nun. They were like, are there going to be sisters there? They're going to be everywhere. And so I said to them, I talked to them about, now there are religious sisters that don't wear habits that are very holy women. But I had prepared them, when you see the habit, that's how you know she's the bride. She's wearing her bridal gown, right? And so I said, I want you to find those bridal gowns. I want you to go up to her. I want you to hug her and thank her. And you know, they were like, they're going to think we're nuts. And you know what? The sisters loved it. The girls did it. And then we ended up running into some Nashville Dominican sisters on our way home at like the hometown buffet, you know. You'll never see religious in the hometown buffet, so you take advantage of it when you can. So we stopped, and they're all in white. And one of the girls said, Miss Michelle told us that this is your bridal, this is what your wedding feast garb or whatever, and she had a big. And they hugged them, and they talked with them, and they ate dinner with them. And these girls had an experience of seeing that these women are doing a really beautiful thing with their sexuality. It has nothing to do with being not sexual, right? So that's what the theology of the body is really all about. And so when we talk about truth, freedom, and the life of the body, which we're going to talk right now, it's to know what to do with this beautiful gift that God has given us. And we do it in truth, and we do it in freedom, according to God's plan. So a couple of things. We must speak truth. So the body has to be, in order to be truly free, the body has to speak its truth. You can't use your body for things that it's not intended for, or it's telling a lie. Okay? And so we need to give love, and we need to receive love. And a very non-sexual example, and a very mundane example, is when you go to have a baby, or if you go to an orphanage ever, they will have people in the hospitals and in orphanages that their whole job is to hold babies. Have you ever seen people do this, right? There are orphanages all over the world that take missionaries that you can go. Like, I have a friend who works in Haiti, and he has missionaries who come, and their job, have you ever done it? It's fantastic. I mean, who doesn't like to hold a baby, for crying out loud, right? Have you done it? No. Okay, you should. It's awesome. If you're never going to be a mother, you should go do it. If you're never going to be a father, you should do it. But their whole job is to hold babies. Do you know why?
Because if you don't touch children when they're developing, they won't develop properly. So they do all these studies where if there's children that are born, they don't have physical contact.
Right.
They're mentally stunted. Like they can't develop.
They have mental, emotional, and physical ramifications.
With a lot of species, they'll actually die, and that's attributed with humans. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I haven't heard that. But they do. So when you go to have a baby, they within the first 3 minutes that your baby is born, they make you put the baby on your chest. Because there's something that's needed for the development of that child. They need human contact. They need love. They need touch. They need affection. They need interaction. And so there are people, like when I was in the hospital with the baby, my baby was in the NICU, and there were women, volunteers, who would come in and they would just hold babies. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing I've done. There was one woman who was paid to do it. It's like, this is the kind of But it gives testimony to the truth that we're made for love, we're made to give love, and we're made to receive love. Our physical development is dependent on it. Our emotional, our spiritual development is dependent on it. And God made us that way. And if we don't have it, something goes amok, right? And so it's a mundane example, but it shows when it's done in the way God plans, everything goes the way it's supposed to go. We never acknowledge when kids are developing and healthy, all that sort of thing, but we acknowledge when they're not. We acknowledge when they're lacking. We have to acknowledge how beautiful and how good it is to just love someone and to give love and to receive love. Physical, emotional, spiritual, on every level, right? And our culture that we live in, I would go so far as to say, and our Holy Father, and the Holy Father before him, and the Holy Father before him, has said the Western culture is saturated with information about sex. And 99.9% of it is not in God's plan. Almost all of it is wrong in terms of what God intends for us and our relationship with other people. And our cultural understanding of sexuality then is askew. So, you see things like multiple partners, like a stupid show. There's a show, someone just told me about it, and I didn't know about it until recently, when the guy's married to like 6 different people. Sister wife. Don't you want to grab the women and shake them? This understanding of love is now askew. Now, those are extreme examples, but just thinking, just homosexuality, contraception, just people living together. Having multiple sexual, going to get married and having had 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 sexual partners before you meet your spouse. And having to explain to the person that you're married, this is what my life was. I love the Lord now and I'm walking with him now, but I have to explain about my life. And both my husband and I had to do that, and it was very hard. And it's very embarrassing. And I got a funny story to tell you. So, you think your past doesn't come to haunt you? Let me tell you a funny one. Don't tell. Okay. So, my husband and I bought a house in Madison. We had to move back to Madison because his job returned here. And I had never lived in Madison. I don't know much about Madison. I do know about his life. And he had a woman that he dated for 8 years. And he got into a lot of trouble with her. Trouble that he had to explain to me why they made the decisions they made in high school and college. Okay? And so, years and years of contraception and cohabitating and all kinds of other things. And so, he tells me the story about her, and I have photo albums of her in my house, and he'll, don't look at him, but he doesn't want to throw them away because it's a part of his life and it's a part of his past, and all his other friends are in the pictures or whatever. And so, one day I found them in the garbage, and I pulled them out because I think he felt bad that they were there. So, her name is Trisha. And one day, I am walking my dog, who's very cute, he's a pug, and I was walking Pete, and there's this live in a neighborhood up on, like, as you're heading in Westport. I don't know if you guys know where Westport is, right? But up M, I live up right by Wanakee. And I live in a neighborhood that's back on the lake. And most of the houses in my neighborhood, not mine, most of the houses in my neighborhood are very large. And I live in a very small old house. And so I live walking along the lake in this beautiful neighborhood, and there's no children because these are people who have money and long, old people, right? So there's this young family, and I was so excited. And she stopped, she says, "Can my kids pet your dog?" And I was like, "Oh, absolutely, he's so much fun, his name's Pete, you know, he loves kids." And we're talking, and she's a beautiful girl, very pretty, very young, and she's telling me about her job and her life, and and her husband actually stays at home, she makes big bucks, all this good stuff. So I come home, and I said, "I just met a family, they have kids, 3 little kids." I was excited, you know? And he's like, "Awesome, cool, maybe we should like hang out with them sometime." So a couple of days later, man comes back from his walk with Pete, and his face, he's like, "That's her." I was like, I busted out. I was like, that sucks. I trust my husband wholeheartedly. I have no issues. He's a very good, holy man. But I can't even imagine living down this street with that person. And I just couldn't laugh. So our joke, you know, I'll be like, "Why don't you go ask your girlfriend down the road or whatever?" You know? But, no, not in a mean way, in a nice way. But you know, he never walks the dog.
Ouch.
But you know what's funny is, it's very clear by the bumper stickers on her car, and I'm not talking politics, I'm talking moral things on her car. She and he took completely separate paths. You know, the things that she values, the things that she apparently wants to support are not the things that he has chosen to support in his life, and the life he's chosen to live. And so, you know, these things do come back to our lives, you know, and God can heal anything, and he will, if you ask for that, and you go to the sacraments, and go to the sacrament of reconciliation. Our sins are forgiven, and God can bring healing even to the emotional and spiritual. But it's just a funny story, you know, of how the things come back. And, you know, I told our high school, Luke and I taught high school kids together last year. I told our kids, and they're like, "No way," you know, like, you just don't know. You know, you just don't know. So, another thing too that is happening in our culture that I can talk with you about is genderless. Now, this is a quote that I took from the Washington Post. Okay, and this was a letter to the editor. And I know that I'm almost done here, but I want to read you and give you just a couple things. I'm sorry, Shalane. It says, in his classic book, so this was a guy who had written to the editor. In his classic book, Sexual Suicide, the great American intellectual George Gilbert, now I don't know who George Gilbert is, so I don't know what this, but this was just somebody writing. Wrote that when a society plays with the essence of what we are as male and female, we play with fire and we will be burned. Oh, that's a great quote, right? This week in the Massachusetts State Department of Education stoked the fire well with its pages of new regulations honoring the civilization-eroding idea that children may declare that they are male, female, other, or no gender at all. And the school, it says, for an example, Massachusetts moves on unisex restrooms for transgender students. It is now a state law. Isn't that crazy? You know, just these are things that didn't exist when I was in school. We didn't even talk about this stuff, right? And so we just slowly, this frog is dying in the boiling water, right? Keep going. Yeah. So we're called in the light of truth, freedom, and sexual honesty. We're called to live in sexual honesty. We have to tell the truth in our body. That means what we do with this person, sexual or non-sexual, has to reflect who we are in truth and in freedom. And so it has to reflect what God's plan is for us. And we have to know what that is, and sometimes you have to study. You know, each person is unrepeatable. They have a value and they have a gift. We can't treat them like they're something to be used, and we can't think we are something to be used. Whether sexually, emotionally, anything. And truth and love go hand in hand. And we use the analogy in marriage prep, and I love it. It's that, like, the whole world sort of drives around on deflated tires. And the whole world acts like that's normal. You know? And so when people really inflate their tires and they start living a real holy life, it almost feels weird. Because the whole world is not doing it. But if the whole world goes around driving on deflated tires, it doesn't mean that's how the car is supposed to run. Right? It's supposed to run with inflated tires, but just because everybody's stupid and doing it doesn't mean that we should. Right? Doesn't mean that that's God's plan. Right? If you saw this, you would be like, oh my gosh, somebody's tire is flat. There's something wrong. But we've convinced ourselves everybody's tires are flat, so it's okay. It's normal. It's what we do. It's who we are. It's not how we're created to be. Okay, so we also are called to sexual honesty during marriage. So getting married, eventually doesn't mean, doesn't guarantee sexual honesty. You don't unleash the chains and all of a sudden you can have sex and it's this fabulous thing. I mean, it requires a diligence and a love and respect for one another. That's good. Keep going. There's a book that I brought you to show you. And I really think that every person that is single before they get married should read this book. And it's called The Love That Satisfies. And it talks about knowing and encountering a God who is love. And what does it mean on a godly level? That's not the same kind of love you're going to have with your spouse. It just isn't. But if you understand the difference between love that the Lord loves you with and you love him with, you can understand then the counterfeits that are on earth. Because love on earth and eros kind of love should be a reflection of agape kind of love that you have. And you will understand when it doesn't reflect God properly. And it helps us to know ourselves. When I married my husband, I told him that he had to read this book before I would marry him. And he did it. And I'm very grateful to him. And he had no idea what it said until years later when we talked about it again and we read it again. But it really helped me as a person, helped me to know the difference between what is the love that God has planned and what's the love that is whether I'm going to be married or not, whether I'm going to be a priest or religious, or remain single for the next 10 or 15 years of my life. You have to know what God's plan is for you so that you can live that out and be the most joyful according to God's plan. So keep going. I was going to talk about contraception, but I'm out of time. And I have a paper for you about humanity, Dan. I'm going to give it to you, and you can look at it and read it. But Pope Paul VI predicted that if contraception, how many of you read Humanity? Anybody? A few of you? Yeah? A little bit? Sort of running? Okay, good.
Skim through it.
Yeah, I have 40 of these. So on this sheet, it tells you what the predictions were that Paul VI gave. If contraception was going to become regular in the world and a regular usage of it, this is what the result is going to be. And I have to tell you that I, as a young woman in high school and college, I had a health issue. And it was the natural inclination of the doctors that were around me to put me on contraception for my health. And I want to warn you that that is not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. And I think it introduced into my life a quote-unquote freedom that wasn't there before. And it introduced to me a life that I would have never participated in had I not had that freedom to have sex without being pregnant. And I got in a lot of trouble. And so, trouble that I had to explain to my husband. Trouble that I had to confess. Trouble that I had to suffer over decisions that I made. And I think it's really important to know, but Paul VI, in this, it's a beautiful, beautiful, you should read the actual document, but this is Janet Smith. She wrote just a summary on the prophecies. Infidelity and moral decline, lost respect for women, abuse of power, unlimited dominion, and he explains what each one of them are, and then he talks about some of the positive things that Paul VI talked about too. So I think it's really important to know that contraception is a lie. When you take it, your body is telling a lie. You know, when you take it and you use it for to prevent pregnancy and to have sexual relationships, you're telling a lie to the body. It's never intended to be used in that way. And the World Health Organization, too, I wanted just to encourage you, especially women, that contraception is considered a class 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization. You have a 68%, if you watch the World Health Organization, you just search for oral contraceptives, all of it will come up. A 68% higher chance of having breast cancer, and something like 80-some% higher chance of getting cervical cancer due to HPV because it doesn't prevent human papillomavirus. So just the rampant difficulties that come from participating in a contraception culture. I woke up one day, I was living a holy life and I was still taking it for health reasons. I had come back to the Lord and decided to live holy. And I was watching a commercial on TV, and at the end of the commercial, they're like, side effects include. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And so I started to look at it and stumbled upon a doctor. We have one in Madison here who teaches women how to take care of their health according to natural medicine. Yeah, and NFP is not necessarily just for married people, but it's an opportunity for women to learn about their health, to learn about their body, and to understand what God made our lives for. So someday you may be married, someday you may be in a situation where you have to counsel somebody who's getting married, if you're a priest or a religious or something of that nature. And so this Creighton model of fertility care, especially for women who have health issues, if God made your body, God has a plan for your life, He has a solution in which to bring you into. And so another thing that you have to submit to contraceptive culture in order to be okay. That God has a plan. And so I could not have children. I was told that I would never have children, and I have a baby. And I had 4 miscarriages just prior to him, and it was the first thing that the Catholic doctor looked at me and said, how long did you take contraception? And I said, how did you know? He said, 95% of women come in my door. There's a link between infertility and contraception. So even if we sometimes think we're doing the right thing to care for our health, sometimes we're not. So there are solutions. But I have lots of information for you if you want that. I also have one about why it isn't good to live together with someone before you're married, and just how that also speaks to a lot about how we're created. You guys live together? I'm sorry, I went over, but I'm done. I'm done. So I just want to encourage you, and I have a couple, for anybody that's interested, that really is, Janet Smith is a philosophy professor, and she gave a talk, a famous talk called Contraception, Why Not? And I don't have one for everybody. I stole these from the marriage prep supplies, and so at work. And but I have a few. If anybody's really interested in sort of listening to an intellectual argument and a philosophical argument as to why contraception is not appropriate and what the problem is, it's fantastic. You can stick it in your car, you can listen to it, you can stick it on your iPad or your iPod or whatever you use. And so I have about 6 of them. So if anybody would like one, I'm more than happy to share them with you. And one last thing, for those of you that have big questions about the existence of God, I work for the bishop's office, and my job is an education among the Catholic schools and the parishes. And we are hosting an event with Father Robert Spitzer, who is doing a talk entitled From Physics to the Existence and Love of God. And so there's a great biography of him on that. And so you go ahead and if you're interested in coming up, that is a great opportunity. So, should we, what do you do now? Should we end? You applaud?